Welcome to CommercialDrones.fm, the podcast that explores the commercial drone industry, the people who power it, and the concepts that drive it. I'm your host, Ian Smith.
Hey everyone, coming at you from the Commercial UAV Expo 2018 in fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm here with the only three-time guest in Commercial Drones FM podcast history, the one, the only, the Drone Analyst, Colin Snow. Welcome to the show, Colin.
Hey, well, thank you for having me again. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I appreciate you coming back on. We always have some really fun and interesting conversations about the drone industry and just kind of all the trends and the analysis that you do. So it's always like a very, very highly anticipated episode for myself and also for the audience. Last time, actually, when we spoke, we ended, and it was funny because we were predicting the next time we would be doing this, which was a year from then. And then I think we ended it with like, see you in the 80s. And then I threw some like 80s synth track. So we were actually correct. So we are going to be in the 80s of the numbers of episodes that we're doing. So welcome to the 80s, Colin. Welcome back to the 80s. You guys recently released a new report. So maybe you can just first off tell us about Skylogic and just this report and your newest report.
Sure. Well, Skylogic Research, we're a research content and advisory services firm. And I started in 2012, so I've been following the industry since then. And the purpose was to really support the commercial unmanned aircraft systems industry, not necessarily, and we really don't focus on either military or consumer. Our mission is to help companies make critical investment decisions by providing research-based insights. And the research that you're talking about, the one that we just released, this is our third annual industry benchmark report. And the objective each year is to really kind of gain insights into which of the industry players are thriving, which ones aren't, how businesses are using drones in their day-to-day operations. And in our survey and in our report, we evaluate four distinct segments of the market. We look at drone aircraft and payload purchases, that's one. 2, we look at the drone service providers. 3, we look at business and public agency users, so those with drone programs, and they may be either contracting out or they may be using internal employees. And then we look at the software and apps and services. And so data collected from this report, and like it is each year, it's done from a survey that we conduct over the web. This one was done in July and August. And the research itself was sponsored. We had 4 sponsors this year. We had DJI, we had Drone Deploy, DroneInsurance.com, and Trimble. But we don't get input from them once the survey starts. They help us a little bit to tailor the questions to make sure that we've got the right options. But they don't in any way influence the results of the survey or the analysis. So it's an independent survey. We had over 2,500 respondents this year, 60 industries. The report itself is like 107 pages, 51 figures. And we've structured it this year kind of in a pyramid. We start at the top. We've got 10 key insights, and then we have below that specifics on the 4 segments that I just explained. Mm-hmm. And then underneath of that is a very detailed analysis of each question and the analytics behind it.
Very, very cool. And so what I really like about these is that it always reveals, since it is an independent study and we all have our own perceptions of the industry, based off like social buzz and talking to people at these shows, but getting people to answer honestly for certain questions and then looking at the data always reveals these awesome insights and trends. And so you mentioned that there was 10 insights that you kind of pulled out. I went ahead before Colin and I met up now to record this. I went ahead and chose my top 5 that I would like to speak with Colin about, just to kind of like chat about them and dive a little bit deeper into the findings in the report, because it's just super cool. And so I'll just give like a quick summary of the ones we're going to talk about now, and then we'll just kind of dive into it. So the first one is like DJI's domination. Like, it's out there, everybody knows about it, but there's, data that Colin's report has in it. People are purchasing more expensive aircraft now. That's the second insight. It turns out service providers are not reporting as much revenue maybe as we had imagined or forecasted or others had thought. That's the third one. And then for the fourth, high accuracy mapping techniques are not quite being adopted as fast as probably they should, I'll say. And then the fifth one is fleet sizes. So fleet sizes of businesses using drones apparently are smaller than we thought, and number of flights are lower than we thought. So those are the five insights. Let's jump on in. Maybe we should start with DJI. How about that?
Yeah. Well, DJI, a report shows this. DJI continues to dominate the market, and this year's made gains in every product category. So that's not just drone aircraft of all price ranges, but also to add-on payloads and software. So let's start with drone aircraft purchases. They're still the dominant brand. They've got a 74% global market share across all price points.
That's up from previous years.
From previous years, yeah. So in 2015, they were about 50% market share. Last year, they were at 72%. So now they're up 74%. And what's interesting is that, a lot of people considered that the data security issue was going to be gloom and doom. And in fact, the exact opposite happened, right? They increased their market share. What's interesting is that, we look across all the price points, and they have an even higher market share in this core segment. The core segment of drone purchases happens between $1,000 and $2,000. So in that segment, they've got an 86% market share. So again, up from last year. When we look at drone aircraft payload market, their Zen use RGB camera and sensors and gimbal combination now accounts for a third of all purchases. So that's a big increase of last year, where it represented somewhere around 4 or 5%. And that's because people are buying the more expensive DJI aircraft, right? So they're choosing their payload. So one of the things we remind people is you have to keep in mind that this is brand market share across all price points. And so you can't view this in isolation. When we look at, of course, the varying price ranges, as I mentioned, that core $1,000 to $2,000 range, it's higher. But we have a lot of detail around the price points where DJI has made increases, and it's in the more expensive aircraft. The thing that we see is the dominance really is around and a result of their kind of aggressive product development, their technological advancements.
Have you flown, or do you have a Mavic 2 Pro? Because I know you're an avid photographer.
I am an avid photographer. I don't have a Mavic 2 Pro yet. I just got rid of my Inspire 1.
All right.
So I had an Inspire 1 Pro with an X5 camera, and I was holding on to that and holding on to it, kind of waiting for the next iteration of a small drone. Previously I had a Mavic. But again, it's that high resolution. It's that 1-inch sensor that just makes photography really sweet.
I bought one because I was like, I was like, okay, I'm not going to buy this first Mavic Pro. I was like, I'm waiting for Mavic 2, for Mavic 2. I was waiting for a while, and then finally it was announced, and I bought it, and it's amazing. Really, I have to say and just listening to me talking about it, no wonder DJI has dominant market share. It's just such a good experience. The connection is rock solid. Yep. They improved their OcuSync technology, so there's zero artifacting when I've flown this thing. It handles wind like a champ in windy San Francisco. The camera is incredible. The props are quieter. It's just an awesome machine, and so. Duh. Anyone could have predicted that it was going to be an amazing thing. It's actually, and I'm just going to take it aside. It's like, so Apple sometimes makes Apple is my kind of comparison to DJI here. Sometimes there's a design faux pas. Everyone thinks Apple has the best design ever. Then they come out with these weird things like that Apple Magic Mouse that you can only charge it from the bottom or something. You couldn't use it while you're charging it, that wireless mouse. Mm-hmm. So it's is DJI going to make these terrible design decisions yet for their products? They don't seem to have done that. And it seems like they're taking these risks sometimes by just pushing the technology forward. I don't know. I'm just what is the deal here? How are they going to make a bad drone?
Yeah,
ever?
Yeah. You never know, right? You never know. But certainly what we've seen from them so far, just can they continue to kind of increase incrementally, right? And so now they've got this strategic partnership and investment in Hasselblad. That's, that gives them at least the brand name. I mean, the 1-inch sensor is probably a Sony sensor.
Yeah.
But regardless, right?
I'm interested in that.
Name.
If someone's going to take it apart and like find out the part number, because I'm really curious on that.
Yeah. I don't know any other companies making 1-inch sensors. So I don't know.
And Sony makes excellent 1-inch sensors because they're in all the drones.
They do. Well, what the thing about that, when I kind of look at DJI, I look at it, I compare it to Sony and what Sony has done with mirrorless cameras. They're now the dominant player in mirrorless cameras. And they've done that with their sensors and the back-end processing. And so what you see in the back-end processing of the Mavic 2 Pro is very similar to the progression that Sony's been making with the way in which they do their processing in the background. So with their Exmor sensors. So I've been an RX 100 buyer and seller for a while, because every time they come out with a new version, I just go ahead and sell my old one on eBay and buy the new one. And the new one's, phenomenal. Again, it has to do with that 1-inch sensor, but also to do with the back-end processing that allows you to do things like HDR, time lapse. These are the things that people are looking to kind of push the envelope. But that requires a lot of processing. So yeah, it's interesting. I think what will be interesting is you see the rumors now with DJI Enterprise version coming out. So we have a Mavic Pro 2 Enterprise version coming out. And it'll be interesting to see what happens at Airworks, because one of the things, this is another reason why DJI dominates the industry, is they've been very, very strategic in the way in which they make partnerships in their ecosystem. And they've not split the company, but they've divided the company now. You have an R&D group, and you have a consumer group, and you have an enterprise group. And the consumer group and the enterprise group inform the R&D as to what products and features should be in the next drone or in the current drone, in the software, et cetera. And that's a fairly new thing for DJI. And so it's this enterprise group that I continue to follow very closely. I think we'll see from it coming up at Airworks some pretty interesting partnerships.
That's later on this month, I think, in Denver again. Or are they going
Dallas?
Dallas. Okay, interesting. Off to Texas. All right, let's move on to the next one. DJI, they're dominating. Everybody knows it. But I just wanted to just talk about it a little bit. And anyways, let's talk about then the next one. So you tell me what the next one is, because I don't know how to phrase it. I have my little scratch notes.
Well, it's about more expensive aircraft. The commercial market, one of the things we saw in the survey this year was the commercial market is slowly shifting toward more expensive drone aircraft. Now, that's a complete opposite twist from last year, where we saw that the price of aircraft for professional work had actually gone down. And so we were seeing sub $1,000 drones being used for commercial purposes. And a lot of that had to do with the Phantom 3 line that was still out being sold. It had to do with the aftermarket, the used market. So you still had people buying them and testing them out, using them as proof of concepts. And so without taking a big risk, I can buy last year's technology. Hey, this is what people do. That's why I get to sell my RX 100 cameras, because people want to buy it at a lower price.
Have you bought I'm just curious. Have you bought a drone that was pre-owned? I'll call it.
Never.
Yeah, same here. I'm like, for cameras it's one thing, but like, I don't know, for drones I am just skeptical of, like, unless I know the person, I don't know. Buyer beware.
But well, I can tell you this. Here's what I can tell you is that when I sold my Inspire 1, right, with the X5 camera, and I had the Olympus 12mm lens on it, I had never crashed that. In fact, I still had the original props on it, and I've flown hundreds of flights. It's that reliable.
Yeah.
So, there is an aftermarket, and I think and a lot of that is the DJI factor, because, people are able to keep it flying.
Interesting. Yeah.
Anyway, so let's go back to, the more expensive aircraft. So clearly, like I said, the market shifted towards higher priced aircraft. So the survey tells us that this is really a result of more businesses and enterprises adopting and scaling their drone programs, as well as more drone-based service providers and surveying and mapping and GIS professionals opting for drones with better and more reliable and more resolute payloads. So I think I mentioned this. Our survey finds that 32% of all purchases were for aircraft costing over $2,000, and that's up 10% from last year. We also find that more than 2/3, about 73% of all drones weighing over 250 grams, and that's the registerable point at which you need to register your drone if it's above 250 grams, are purchased for professional purposes. So, which is really phenomenal. That's up 5%. Last year it stood at 68%. This year it's 73%.
73% of drones purchased above 250 grams are used
purchased for professional purposes.
Wow.
Yeah. Huh. Yeah. Last year's medium range for drone purchases was that $1,000 to $2,000, and that accounted for about 45% of purchases. But again, this year it's down, and that's because more purchases are happening above $2,000. So from this, we go through a lengthy calculation. We calculate the weighted average price of drones costing more than $500, which is 88% of all purchases. And it's $1,718. That's what our calc says. That's about $175 more than it was last year. So that last year's weighted average was about $1,500. So this year it's about $1,700.
You saw, and I don't hate, but it's frustrating to always have to bring DJI as an example. But like, it's interesting. I don't know if you saw the thing about just talking in the realm of higher priced drones. They released the Phantom or the Mavic 2 Pro, and then they increased the price like a few weeks later. Interesting.
Yeah.
Like, who can do that?
Yeah.
Not many companies can do that.
No,
and just
not many
get away
companies.
with it.
Right.
It's crazy. And it was not even like significant, or insignificant. It was like $60 or something. Maybe it's around $30 to $60. I don't remember the exact figure, but like, okay, more expensive drones. So that average, when we do this next, when you do the next survey, maybe we'll see it continue to go up.
It might bump up a little bit. Again, going back to my Sony example, every RX version that comes out, the next one that comes out is a little bit more money.
Yeah. Huh. Okay.
This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by FLIR. Pretty much everyone in the commercial drone world knows about FLIR's thermal imaging technologies and may even have a basic understanding of how their sensors work. At Commercial Drones FM, we think this technology is deserving of the spotlight to reveal some of the incredible things thermal imaging drones can accomplish. Drones equipped with thermal imagers offer a way to see the world from a different perspective, which can help identify infrastructure problems, locate missing people, and increase safety and efficiency across a variety of industries. The value of thermal imaging for commercial drone operations is undeniable. So I want to use this podcast as a platform to dive deep into the world of heat and seek out the best practices and the unique use cases that make thermal imaging sensors the most drone-ready payload for commercial drone applications right next to RGB cameras. So join us over the coming months as we invite FLIR and their customers into our studio to discuss the technical and practical uses of their groundbreaking efforts in aerial thermal imagery. This episode of Commercial Drones FM is brought to you by Deveron UAS. Deveron UAS offers enterprise drone services for farmland across North America. I recently spoke with Bonduelle, one of Deveron's largest customers.
So my name is Jennifer Thompson. I work for Bonduelle America's Long Life. We're a vegetable processor. Bonduelle is a very large company with 54 plants in the world. Here in North America, we have 11 plants doing frozen and canned vegetables.
So naturally, I wanted to know, how is Deveron helping one of the largest vegetable processors in the world by using drone technology?
So we use Deveron to service and support our precision agricultural needs. For us, it's not easy to have our own or fly our own drones to gather crop data. So Deveron is ready and available to work for us when needed. We fly thousands of acres, and managing those acres, it just works very easily with them in our fast-paced growing season. They're not just providing data, they're helping to solve issues and find solutions.
Well, that's very important work, but what's your favorite crop to eat?
My favorite crop to eat is sweet corn. I will eat sweet corn 365 days of the year.
I'm not sure if I've ever eaten sweet corn yet that was monitored by drone. To learn more, visit deveronuas.com/dronesfm and see for yourself how Deveron is leading collaboration in agriculture with drones. That's deveronuas.com/dronesfm. Okay, back to the show. Next one. Service providers are reporting not a lot of revenue. So this is something that I think a lot of people, like if I look back before we can get into the details, a lot of people kind of seem to have this like gold rush mentality of, oh, this drone industry is going to be big. I want to get into it immediately and try to just make a ton of money as a service provider. And I think there was a lot of like reality checks with that, like over the past few years. But let's see what the data says.
Sure. We do this every year. We want to assess, how big are our drone service providers, and we want to know their revenue and how many employees, full and part-time, how many pilots they have, how many drones they operate. And we ask that kind of in this series of questions. So, for example, first we asked, what's the company's revenue from commercial drone operations? And what the survey respondents told us, and there's about 815 people answering this particular question, the data shows us that 16% of all service providers reported that they're not making any revenue at all. 22% make more than $50,000 a year, and only about 12% make over $100,000 a year. And by now, personally, I'd kind of expected the word to have spread that these three-figure incomes for independent service providers was mostly hype. Doesn't mean you can't make that much money.
The six-figure,
the six-figure over $100,000. Many can, but our data shows that three-figure income is attainable because you've got at least 12% of service providers making over $100,000. But it's only by a select few who've kind of tailored their offerings to markets that command higher revenue. So more than just simple aerial photography and video services that are offered by, the Drone Pilot or the Drone Pilot networks. It's something we watch closely. We look at the forums on Facebook, and, we follow the groups, Drone Pilots and commercial SUAS pilots. And we look at all the discussions. And from time to time on Twitter, I'm at Drone Analyst on Twitter. I post a link to those forums, and you can see what commercial pilots are saying about how much revenue they're making. But here's the thing, compared to last year, we are seeing a bit of an increase. So there's a lower percentage of people that are making less than $50,000 and a higher percentage that are making over $50,000. So, but the problem still remains is that very few make enough to make a revenue for a sustainable business, and a lot of them are fine. It was interesting. One of the things I had specifically this year on the survey was how many people were in retirement. And surprisingly, a good almost 10% of people said, I'm retired. I'm retired from the Air Force. I'm a retired engineer. And this is sort of my part-time venture.
Interesting. Okay. So, and I just want to say, this is also just across the entire U.S., right? This is a U.S. focused survey.
No, it's, it's about 75% across in the U.S., but it's global. And those reports were a bit different outside of the U.S. So outside of the U.S., you had more people making more money. It's just in the U.S., right? Because the hurdle's low here, right? Part 107, is very simple to get. You take a test, and that's it. You're not even required to have insurance. But after that, you can just hang on a shingle or put up a website. And that allows you to say that, you're a commercial operator. For the minute you charge money for anything, you're a commercial operator.
I was just going to say, so some states, though, I live in San Francisco, 100K is fairly normal, I would say.
Yeah.
We live both in the Bay Area. But in somewhere in middle U.S., that's very, very good. But I'm just curious on maybe even diving deeper potentially in the future on the geographies that the people are located in and where they're making these figures, because I think you can make those huge amounts of cash whenever you do tailor your services and you get some really good clients. You have to be so specialized, like you're saying. You got to have nice repeatable business and not just doing the simple photos and videos. Those are like heavily commoditized now.
Sure. Yeah. And in last year's survey and in this year's survey, we show who is it, that is, what service are you offering as a drone service provider where you're more likely to make over $100,000? And it's been clear for the past 3 years that it's in the surveying and mapping and GIS. Mm-hmm. So it's those people who offer or are part of that service, that drones are a part of their surveying and mapping service. They're the ones who are making more than $100,000 a year.
That's very specialized. You might even you have to have like a surveyor, licensed land surveyor, all that stuff. So that makes sense. Okay. So how about the next one? Speaking of land surveying, the high accuracy mapping techniques are not that widely adopted. So what do we mean here? What are we talking about?
Well, we asked a specific question about the georeferencing technique that people were using. So we asked them, hey, are you using anything? And you could check nothing. Are you using ground control points? Are you using real-time kinematic? Are you using direct georeferencing? Or are you using post-process kinematic, PPK? So ground control points, RTK, direct georeferencing, or PPK. And, we know that we asked this question specifically because we know that getting survey grade maps from drone data collection is challenging. But what's interesting, what comes back is that, 46% don't use any georeferencing technique at all to improve the accuracy of their maps. For those that do use some kind of method, we found that about a third of the people use ground control points, and even less use RTK and PPK or direct georeferencing. So, this was about 1,000 people who answered that particular question. So we got fairly good data, so we're surprised to see that. Again, the bottom line is that, almost half don't use any georeferencing technique to improve the accuracy of the map. Either they don't know or that the work that they're getting or doing doesn't require that specific. Yeah. It could be that they just need a casual grade survey as part of the work.
For construction, there's like so many different phases. Just as an example of an industry, there's so many different phases of the construction life cycle that drones can be used, and much more critical for the high accuracy part is like in the pre-planning and like pre-setup, or what do they call it? I forget the specific term, but whenever you're kind of getting the site ready to be built upon.
Right, sure.
Gosh, I can't think of the term right now. So anyways, after that, once the construction is started, they usually I don't see them do like super high accuracy maps a lot, because a lot of it is just like, okay, we need to do a stockpile here. It's not critical that we're so accurate on that, and then we just need like a general overview of the entire site, and see what the progress is changing and da-da-da-da-da. So that kind of makes sense to me. But yeah, I wonder if you would have asked me just blind, like how many people do you think use ground control points? I don't know what I would have answered. Maybe 50%. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
I would have assumed it would have been somewhere around, because there's a lot that's been done on this. I would have assumed it's above 50%, but there you have it. But it makes sense about we're various stages. It depends upon the particular use case.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, there's lots of room to grow there, especially with RTK adoption, and if manufacturers start building RTK more into their platforms, then I'm sure that we'll see, next year in the couple of years that's going to go up, and it'll just be default, it'll just be on there. Mm-hmm. And so the last insight that we're going to talk about today is fleet sizes of drones and number of flights. So tell us a little bit about that, the data behind that.
Well, we wanted to. This was the first year we asked this. We really wanted to see how big fleet sizes were for both businesses and drone service providers. And kind of our takeaway is that there's a lot of hyperbole that there's hundreds of thousands of drones flying in our national airspace at the same time. Our survey finds that the average service provider has just 2 drones. Most perform only 2 projects a month, and most of those operations, over 3/4, involve less than 3 flight hours. So, and fleet sizes for businesses or public agencies are also small, with more than 2/3 reporting fewer than 5 drones, 14% reporting that they have 10 or more. So there are companies that have large fleets and that do a lot of flights. The Department of Interior, has just released their data and, thousands of flights.
Hundreds of drones.
Yeah, and then hundreds of drones. So, okay, but that's not the average. And so we're looking at kind of, where is it as a whole, and what's the gestalt? So, for example, I'll give you some specifics here. So here's a fleet size for service providers. 27% said they had one. 29% said they had two drones. 16% said they had three drones. So there's 75%. 75% have less than three drones. So, but the mean or the mode is two. So that's kind of what our bottom line is for that. But we wanted to go beyond this. We wanted to actually look at to measure the extent of drone use. We asked a couple of questions. Was not just the number of projects, but it was also the number of flight hours per project, and we made a very specific ask in our survey. I know that if anybody's listening who took the survey, appreciate you taking the time. The survey takes about 8 minutes to take, but we're very specific in the way we ask some questions. So we appreciate the input because it really helps to understand what's going on in the industry as an aggregate. We ask specific, flight. We define flight as the operation between a takeoff and landing. Project, in other words, how many projects do you do a year? That's defined as a discrete activity with an objective. So you may be inspecting a bridge, mapping an area. These discrete activities may involve a series of drone flights or involve one or more drone launch and landing performed to do that task over a specific amount of time. But flight hours refers to your airborne time. So when we look at, I'll give you an example of some data that you'll see in the report is drone projects per year for service providers. Like I said, it was small. 34% do less than 5. 15% do 6 to 9. Only about 9% do 100 or more. When we looked at the average flight hours per project, 42% said we're really only in the air 1 hour. The next 27% said we're really only in the air 2 hours. The next 9% said we're only in the air 3 hours. So under 4 hours, that's 75%.
Yeah.
That's what you have, and it's sort of, we back this up. We don't take this as the only bit of data.
Yeah.
We look at the number of their revenue. We look at the employee and how many pilots, and our overall impression. That's why we made this as a key insight. Our overall impression is that flight utilization is low, and it sort of runs counter to those hyped forecasts. Now, having said that, the FAA did put out their own survey, and we haven't seen the data yet. They did put out a survey to FAA Part 107 pilots asking those very same questions. So we'll see what comes back as the result of what they say. It's interesting, so there's really only 100,000 pilots. So the survey only would have gone out to, 100,000. And the survey wasn't global. It was just specific to the U.S.
Yeah.
So we'll have that bit of data when it comes back. But let me give you, my preemption. This is federal data, right? This is an agency that will want to skew the data to show that there are more flights so they can justify regulation. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm just saying be wary when you see it and look at the very specifics. Don't take it on the face data. Don't take the headlines. Do the research. Look at how many people took the survey and look at the very specific. I took the survey myself because I'm a Part 107 pilot.
Yeah.
I found the survey difficult to take. It was hard to take because of the way in which they asked the questions. So that skews data, and we're very keen on paying attention to that. That's part of what you do as a researcher. If you're building a business like I do on research, you're very careful about how you structure your questions, about where they are in a survey, so that people aren't. There's a thing called survey attrition where people just get tired.
And they stop the survey.
They stop, or they just start putting bogus answers.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful of that. And I'm not saying the FAA did that with their survey, but I took it and it was difficult.
Yeah, I see. Well, I took yours and it was definitely a lot more straightforward. Like I was able to answer very quickly, and I was like, okay, this makes sense. I do this, I do that. Like, granted, I'm not like, Mr. Part 107 going all over the place doing tons of projects, but I was still able to answer and I think provide some insight of data at the time that I took it. Now, I want to just talk a little bit about the what was it? The flight times of the drones, or how many times you're in the air. So you've seen this Impossible Aerospace release of this new quadcopter that flies for 2 hours. Really interesting design, very cool. Do you think that the flight times, actually, maybe because they're banking on people wanting to fly longer and longer in the air.
Yeah.
And I think while that's very convenient, of course, but I don't know. Do you think that the new drones that last this long are going to be super quickly adopted? Like, are people craving for this 2 hour endurance? I mean, it also has regulatory implications. If you always have to keep within line of sight, then what are you doing for 2 hours? It totally depends on your mission too. But general thoughts on that and these high endurance drones, and maybe even how does it compare to last year's data? Are flights getting longer, shorter?
I don't have data from last year to find out whether I do have data on the number of projects. The number of projects hasn't changed. It's still static and low. So I would assume that the flight hours are pretty much the same. So here's how we look at this. There is in our survey, we did ask, one of the very first questions is when you made a drone purchase in the last 12 months, was it for a fixed wing? Was it for a multi-rotor? Was it for a hybrid? Was it for a single rotor? Still consistent with last year, about 88% or more are just for multi-rotors. So it's still a multi-rotor world.
Yeah.
So,
gateway drug.
Right. So, and that's just because of the nature of the use cases that people are using drones for. Again, the majority of it is for aerial photography and video. So film, photo, and video, still the largest segment. That accounts for about 44% of all commercial activity. After that, it's surveying and mapping and GIS work. And there you would think, people want a little more endurance. Yeah. And so you see the companies that have gone into and have put their money in fixed wing drones, and fixed wing drones are getting better. You see the new things coming out from SenseFly, the new capabilities, EBX, adding from EBs and adding RTK and from Del Air. Yeah. Good capabilities in their ability that this is the thing with fixed wing drones, is that if I have a limited space for my takeoff and landing, I now am better off probably with a quadcopter or multi-rotor. But nonetheless, the software and the capabilities for landing in a very short area has improved pretty much. There's been some good improvements with so for example on the Del Air products. That said, it's still a multi-rotor world. So is there a need for longer endurance? Yes, there's specific use cases where you may want some longer endurance for persistence. And that ability, but there's a counterpart of that. How long is it going to take to charge? And if batteries are built into my, right into the hardware, I can't swap out a battery to do another mission, to do another part of the mission. So people want to use drones for longer missions. Right now, the standard workflow is swap out the battery and continue the mission. And if my software allows me to pick up where I left off, right, then I have that ability to just bring it back, swap out the batteries, and continue the mission. For the back-end data, it doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter how many flights you have, as long as the data is good and you have the proper overlaps.
Well, I know the solution to the problem then is you just buy 6 of those drones and then you just have them just sitting there. That's interesting. You probably can't even take that thing on an airplane. There's so much lithium batteries, or lipo batteries that lithium polymers. So on an airplane, I don't think you could get it on, but it'll be really interesting to see how they progress. It looks like that company, Impossible Aerospace in particular, is trying to target fighting, which is interesting because it comes with a thermal camera. So I'm going to stop by their booth at the UAV Expo. Was supposed to have an interview with them, but they couldn't make it. I had to cancel at the last minute, which is okay. But I'll get them on the show soon because they're in the Bay Area as well. They're in Sunnyvale. So anyways, Colin, how can people purchase the report, the full report? Like, where should they go?
So they can go to my website, which is droneanalyst.com, and they go into the research tab, or just go droneanalyst.com/research. It's right there. You'll see it. And that's how they can access it.
What's it called again?
It's the 2018 Drone Market Sector Report.
Perfect. Beautiful. Well, Colin, I think I'm guessing here. I think we're going to see each other in the 90s next time.
All right.
So I'll see you over there. We'll get a little 90s classics pumping. So thank you so much again for joining the show and sharing those insights and all the data. Thanks to everybody who took the survey, because you can't do this without that. So this data plays a role in lots of important decisions when people get access to it. So it's definitely not for nothing. So keep doing what you're doing, Colin. I'll always appreciate it. I know everyone in the industry does too. And yeah, I'll catch you next time.
All right. Well, thank you again.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.